The stagecoach rattled into Redemption, Arizona territory on a blistering July afternoon in 1878, carrying a woman who had learned that running only worked if you never stopped moving. Clara Hartwell pressed her gloved hand against the worn leather seat, steadying herself as the wheels hit another rut in the sun-baked road, and wondered if this dusty settlement at the edge of nowhere would finally be far enough from St. Louis and the mistakes that haunted her there. She had $5 to her name, a carpetbag with 2 dresses, and a past that followed her like a shadow she could not shake no matter how many miles she put between herself and the life she had left behind. The town was smaller than she had hoped, just a main street with a general store, a saloon, a boarding house, and a scattering of other buildings that looked like they had been thrown together in a hurry and left to weather the desert sun. Clara climbed down from the stagecoach, her legs unsteady after 3 days of travel, and felt the heat press against her face like a physical thing. The driver tossed her bag down without ceremony, then climbed back up to his seat and urged the horses forward, leaving her standing in a cloud of dust with nowhere to go and no plan beyond surviving another day. She picked up her bag and walked toward the boarding house, a 2-story structure with peeling paint and a sign that creaked in the hot wind. The woman who answered her knock was broad-shouldered and sharp-eyed, the kind who could spot trouble before it announced itself. "I need a room," Clara said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just for a few nights while I find work." The woman looked her over with an appraising gaze that made Clara want to shrink back. $5 a week, meals included, pay in advance. Clara opened her small purse and counted out the coins, knowing that this left her with nothing. The woman took the money and handed her a key. "Third door on the right upstairs. Supper is at 6. If you are looking for work, the general store might need help, or you could try the saloon, though I do not recommend that for a woman trying to stay respectable." The room was small and plain, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window that looked out over the street. Clara set down her bag and sank onto the bed, feeling the exhaustion of the past weeks settle into her bones. She had worked as a seamstress in St. Louis, making dresses for women who looked through her as if she were invisible, until Thomas Blackwell had walked into the shop with his fine suit and easy smile. He had courted her with flowers and promises, and she had been foolish enough to believe that a man like him could truly want a woman like her. The truth had come out slowly, the way poison works through the blood. Thomas was already married, with a wife and children and a fine house on the hill. Clara had been nothing more than an amusement, a distraction from his respectable life. When she had confronted him, he had laughed and told her that women like her should be grateful for whatever attention they could get. The shame had burned worse than any physical wound. And when his wife had come to the shop to make sure Clara understood her place, the humiliation had been complete. She had left St. Louis 3 days later, taking what little money she had saved and buying a ticket west, as far as her funds would carry her. Redemption was the end of the line, literally and figuratively, and now she had to make it work, or starve. The next morning, Clara put on her better dress and walked to the general store, a rambling building that smelled of flour and leather and coffee. The owner was a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles who introduced himself as Mr. Hendricks. He looked at her with interest when she asked about work. "Can you read and write figures?" he asked. "Yes, sir. I kept the books for the seamstress shop where I worked." "I could use someone to help with inventory in the counter. My wife passed last winter, and I have been trying to manage alone." He named a wage that was barely enough to survive on, but Clara took it without hesitation. She could not afford to be particular. She started that afternoon learning where everything was kept and how Mr. Hendricks liked things organized. The work was not difficult, and she was grateful to have something to occupy her hands and mind. The customers were mostly ranchers and townspeople, rough men and weathered women who came in for supplies and gossip. Clara kept her head down and her answers brief, not wanting to invite questions about where she had come from or why. It was on her 3rd day that she first saw him. He came into the store just before closing, a tall man with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He wore dusty clothes and a hat that had seen better days, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly who he was. He nodded to Mr. Hendricks and began gathering supplies, flour and coffee and ammunition, piling them on the counter where Clara stood. "That everything?" she asked, her pencil ready to tally the cost. He looked at her then, really looked, and something in his gaze made her uncomfortable, as if he could see past the careful wall she had built. "That will do for now," he said. His voice was low and steady, with a hint of accent she could not place. "You are new in town." It was not a question, but Clara answered anyway. "I arrived a few days ago." "Jack Mercer," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "I have a ranch about 10 miles north of here. Clara Hartwell." She finished adding up his purchases and told him the total. He paid in cash, counted out exact change, and gathered his supplies. "Welcome to Redemption, Miss Hartwell," he said, and then he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him. "That is Jack Mercer," Mr. Hendricks said, coming over to stand beside her. "He has one of the biggest ranches in the territory. His father started it 20 years ago, and Jack has built it into something impressive. He is a good man, honest and fair, keeps to himself mostly, but folks respect him." Clara nodded and went back to organizing the shelves, but she found herself thinking about the cowboy with the steady gaze and the way he had looked at her, as if she were someone worth noticing. The weeks passed slowly, marked by the rhythm of work and the heat that seemed to press down on the town like a blanket. Clara settled into a routine, waking early to help Mr. Hendricks open the store, working through the day, and returning to her room at the boarding house in the evening. She sent what little money she could spare to a bank account she had opened, saving for the day when she might have enough to start over somewhere else, somewhere even farther from St. Louis and the shame that clung to her. Jack Mercer came into the store every week or two, always polite, always brief. He would gather his supplies, exchange a few words with Mr. Hendricks, and leave. But Clara noticed that he always made a point to greet her, to ask how she was settling in, and his kindness felt genuine in a way that made her suspicious. She had learned not to trust men who seemed too interested, too kind. One afternoon in late August, a woman came into the store, well dressed in a way that spoke of money and position. She looked at Clara with cold eyes and said, "I need to speak with Mr. Hendricks." Clara called for the owner, and the woman swept past her without a second glance. Clara busied herself with restocking shelves, but she could not help overhearing the conversation. "I'm telling you, there is something not right about that woman you hired," the woman said, her voice sharp. "She showed up out of nowhere, no references, no family. Mark my words, she is running from something." Mr. Hendricks's response was too quiet for Clara to hear, but the woman's parting shot was clear. "You will regret bringing trouble to this town." Clara's hands shook as she set down the cans she had been arranging. The woman was right, of course. She was running from something, from shame and heartbreak and the suffocating weight of her own poor choices. But she had hoped that here in this dusty town at the edge of nowhere, she might be allowed to simply exist without explanation. That evening, as she was closing up the store, Jack Mercer appeared in the doorway. "Miss Hartwell, I wonder if I might have a word." Clara's stomach tightened. Had he heard the gossip? Was he here to warn her away, to tell her that women like her were not welcome? "Of course, Mr. Mercer." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I wanted to ask you if you would be interested in taking on some additional work. My housekeeper quit last month to move back east with her daughter, and I have been managing poorly on my own. I need someone who can cook and keep the house in order. It would be 3 days a week, and I would pay you fairly and provide transportation to and from the ranch." Clara stared at him, trying to understand why he would offer this to her. "Mr. Mercer, I appreciate the offer, but I do not know if that would be appropriate." "There is a bunkhouse where the ranch hands stay, Marie," he said quickly. "You would have your own space, complete privacy, and I give you my word that you would be treated with respect. I need the help, Miss Hartwell, and from what Hendricks tells me, you could use the extra income." It was true. The wages from the general store barely covered her room and board, leaving nothing for savings or emergencies. But accepting work at his ranch would mean spending time alone with him, and that felt dangerous in ways she could not fully articulate. "Why me?" she asked finally. There must be other women in town who need work. Jack met her gaze, and again she had that sense that he saw more than she wanted him to. Because you work hard and do not complain. Because Hendricks says you are honest and capable. And because I think you could use someone who is willing to give you a chance without asking questions about where you came from or what brought you here. The words hit her like a physical blow, so unexpected and so precisely what she needed to hear that she felt tears sting her eyes. She blinked them back, not willing to show that kind of weakness. What days would you need me? Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday, if that suits your schedule. I will pick you up at 7 in the morning and have you back by 5 in the evening. Clara thought about the coins in her purse, the meager savings that grew so slowly. She thought about the woman in the store with her cold eyes and her accusations. And she thought about Jack Mercer standing here offering her work without judgment or expectation. All right, she said. I will try it for a month, and we can see if it works out. The smile that crossed his face was brief but genuine. Thank you, Miss Hartwell. I will be here Wednesday morning at 7. True to his word, Jack arrived at the boarding house on Wednesday morning with a wagon and a team of horses. Clara climbed up beside him, acutely aware of the propriety she was violating by riding alone with a man, but there was no help for it. The ranch was too far to walk, and she needed the work. The ride took nearly an hour, following a road that wound through scrubland dotted with mesquite and sagebrush. Jack pointed out landmarks, a rocky outcropping where a spring provided water, a stand of cottonwoods that marked the boundary of his land. He talked easily without pressure, and Clara found herself relaxing despite her reservations. The ranch house was larger than she had expected, a sprawling structure built from adobe and timber, with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Beyond it she could see corrals and barns, a bunkhouse where smoke rose from a chimney, and cattle grazing in the distance. It is not fancy, but it is comfortable, Jack said, helping her down from the wagon. I will show you around, and you can let me know what you need. The inside of the house was surprisingly neat, though Clara could see the signs of a man living alone. Dishes piled in the kitchen, dust on the furniture, clothes draped over chairs. Jack showed her where everything was kept. The pantry stocked with staples, the cleaning supplies in a closet, the wood stove that provided heat and cooking. I am usually out working the ranch during the day, he said. Make yourself at home. If you need anything, the hands can get me, but I trust your judgment. Clara set to work, starting with the kitchen. She washed the dishes and scrubbed the counters, then moved on to sweeping and dusting. By noon, she had a stew cooking on the stove and bread rising on the counter. Jack came in for lunch, bringing with him the smell of horses and dust, and he looked around the kitchen with something like wonder. This is the cleanest it has been in months, he said. Thank you, Miss Hartwell. They ate together at the kitchen table, an awkward meal where Clara was hyper-aware of every movement, every word. But Jack seemed content to eat in silence, and when he finished, he thanked her again and went back to work. The pattern repeated over the following weeks. Clara would arrive at the ranch on her designated days, clean and cook and organize, and Jack would go about his work, appearing only at mealtimes. He was always polite, always respectful, and never once did he make her feel uncomfortable or threatened. Slowly, cautiously, Clara began to relax. One Sunday in September, as she was preparing to leave, Jack appeared in the kitchen with a troubled expression. Miss Hartwell, I need to ask you something, and I want you to know that you can be honest with me. Clara's heart began to pound. This was it. The moment when he would demand answers, when the fragile peace she had built would shatter. What is it? There has been talk in town, he said carefully. People saying that you are hiding something, that you are not who you claim to be. I do not put much stock in gossip, but I wanted you to know what is being said, and I wanted to give you a chance to tell me your side if you want to. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. She had known this was coming, had braced herself for it, but the reality still felt like a blow. What are they saying? That you left St. Louis under suspicious circumstances, that you were involved with a married man, that you are not fit for respectable company. His voice was steady, without judgment, but the words still burned. Clara turned away, unable to meet his eyes. "It is true," she said quietly. "I was involved with a married man. I did not know he was married at first, and when I found out, I ended it. But his wife came to my workplace and made sure everyone knew what I had done. I left because I could not bear the shame any longer." The silence stretched out, heavy and suffocating. Clara waited for him to tell her that she was fired, that he could not have someone like her working in his home. But when he spoke, his words were not what she expected. "Your past does not matter here." She turned to look at him, certain she had misheard. "What?" "Your past does not matter here," he repeated, and his creek water eyes were serious and steady. "What matters is who you are now, how you treat people, whether you do honest work. The rest is just noise." Clara felt something crack inside her chest, a wall she had built around her heart to keep out the pain and the shame. "You do not understand," she said, and her voice broke. "I trusted the wrong person. I made a terrible mistake, and now everyone will always see me as the woman who ruined a marriage, who was foolish enough to believe in pretty words and empty promises." Jack took a step closer, and his expression was fierce. "Anyone who judges you for being lied to and betrayed is a fool. You are not responsible for another person's dishonesty, and anyone who cannot see that you are hardworking and decent and deserving of respect is not worth your time or worry." "But the gossip," Clara said weakly. "It will affect your reputation having me work here." "Let it," Jack said simply. "I do not give a damn what small-minded people think. You have done good work for me, and I have no intention of letting you go because of gossip and judgment." Clara stared at him. This cowboy who spoke with such conviction, such certainty. She had heard similar words before from Thomas, pretty lies designed to manipulate and control. But standing here in Jack's kitchen, looking into his honest eyes, she felt something shift inside her. Maybe, just maybe, he meant what he said. Maybe, for the first time in her life, someone saw her as more than her mistakes. "Thank you," she whispered, and the words felt inadequate for the gratitude she felt. Jack nodded, then seemed to realize how close they were standing. He stepped back, clearing his throat. "I will take you back to town now. Same schedule for next week?" "Yes," Clara said, "same schedule." As the weeks turned into months, Clara found herself looking forward to her days at the ranch more than she wanted to admit. Jack was easy to be around, quiet and steady, and he never pushed her to talk about things she did not want to discuss. They fell into a comfortable rhythm, working alongside each other in the easy silence of people who understood each other without needing constant conversation. One Friday in October, Clara arrived at the ranch to find Jack struggling to repair a tear in his shirt. He looked up when she came in, sheepish. "I am not much of a hand with a needle." Clara laughed, the sound surprising her. She had not laughed in months, maybe longer. "Give it here. I can mend it for you." She sat down at the kitchen table and set to work, her fingers moving with the practiced ease of years spent sewing. Jack watched her for a moment, then said, "You're very good at that." "I worked as a seamstress for 5 years," Clara said. "I made dresses for wealthy women who never bothered to learn my name." "Their loss," Jack said quietly. Clara looked up at him, startled. He was leaning against the counter, his arms crossed, and there was something in his expression that made her heart skip. "Mr. Mercer." "Jack," he interrupted. "I think we have known each other long enough that you can call me Jack." "Jack," she repeated, testing the name on her tongue. "Why are you so kind to me?" He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was careful. "Because I know what it is like to be judged for things beyond your control. My mother was Mexican, and when she married my father, there were people in this territory who made it clear she was not welcome. She endured gossip and hatred, but she held her head high and built a life here anyway. She taught me that character matters more than what people say, and that sometimes the people who have been hurt the most are the ones who deserve kindness the most." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was," Jack said. "She died when I was 15. And I still miss her every day. But I try to live by the things she taught me. Clara finished mending the shirt and handed it back to him. Their fingers brushed, and she felt a jolt of something electric and terrifying. She pulled her hand back quickly, but not before she saw the answering awareness in his eyes. The air between them had changed, charged with possibility and danger. Clara stood up, needing distance, needing to think. I should start on the cleaning. Clara, Jack said, and the sound of her given name in his voice made her pause. I want you to know that I value your work here, but I also value your company. You have made this house feel like a home again, and I am grateful for that. She looked at him. This man who had given her a chance when no one else would, who had defended her against gossip and judgment, who spoke to her as if she were worthy of respect. And she realized, with a clarity that was both exhilarating and terrifying, that she was falling in love with him. I should get to work, she said again, and fled to the safety of cleaning and organizing, where she did not have to confront the feelings blooming in her chest like desert wildflowers after rain, but the feelings would not be ignored. They grew stronger with every week that passed, every conversation they shared, every moment of comfortable silence. Clara found herself thinking about Jack at odd times, remembering the way he smiled, the sound of his laugh, the steadiness of his presence. She told herself it was foolish, that she was setting herself up for more heartbreak, but her heart refused to listen to reason. One Sunday in November, as they were eating lunch together, Jack said, "There is a harvest dance in town next Saturday. I was wondering if you would consider attending with me." Clara's fork clattered against her plate. "Jack, I do not think that is a good idea." "Why not?" His voice was calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Because people will talk. They already think poorly of me. If we are seen together at a social event, it will only make things worse for you." "I told you I do not care what people think," Jack said, "but I care what you think. Do you want to go to the dance with me?" Clara looked down at her plate, her heart pounding. She wanted to say yes more than she had wanted anything in a long time. But fear held her back, fear of being hurt again, fear of trusting the wrong person, fear of believing in something good only to have it snatched away. "I do not know if I can do this." "Do what?" Jack asked gently. "Trust someone again. Believe that someone could want me for more than just convenience or amusement." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but she forced herself to continue. "Thomas said he loved me. He said I was special. And it was all lies, just pretty words to get what he wanted. How do I know you were different?" Jack was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his words were measured and serious. "You do not, I suppose. Trust has to be earned, and I have not had enough time to prove myself to you. But I can tell you this, I have never been one for pretty words or empty promises. When I say something, I mean it. And when I tell you that I care about you, that I admire your strength and your resilience, that I think you are one of the finest people I've ever met, I am telling you the truth." Clara looked up at him, and the sincerity in his eyes made her throat tight. "I am afraid," she admitted. "See, so am I," Jack said. "Caring about someone means risking getting hurt, but I think you're worth the risk, and I hope someday you will think the same about me." Clara took a shaky breath, feeling the walls around her heart crumble a little more. "All right," she said, "I'll go to the dance with you." The smile that lit up Jack's face was worth every ounce of fear she felt. The week before the dance passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. Clara borrowed a dress from one of the other women at the boarding house, a soft blue cotton that brought out her eyes. She spent more time than she cared to admit arranging her hair, trying to tame the brown curls into something presentable. Jack arrived at the boarding house on Saturday evening, looking uncomfortable in a clean shirt and a string tie. His eyes widened when he saw her. "You look beautiful," he said, and the awe in his voice made her blush. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she said, trying to keep her tone light. The dance was being held at the town hall. A large room decorated with paper lanterns and autumn leaves. Music spilled out into the street, a lively fiddle tune that made Clara's feet want to move. But as they walked through the door, she felt the weight of eyes turning toward them, heard the whispers start. Jack must have felt her hesitation because he took her hand and squeezed it gently. "Ignore them," he murmured. "They are not worth your worry." They found a spot near the edge of the room, and Jack asked her to dance. Clara had not danced in years, but she let him lead her onto the floor, and soon she forgot about the stares and the whispers. Jack was a surprisingly good dancer, confident and sure-footed, and being in his arms felt natural and right. They danced 3 dances in a row, laughing and breathless, and Clara felt something loosen in her chest, a knot of fear and shame that had been there so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to be without it. For the first time in months, she felt happy, but the peace could not last. During a break in the music, a woman approached them, the same woman who had confronted Mr. Hendricks in the store. She looked at Clara with barely concealed disdain and said to Jack, "Mr. Mercer, I am surprised to see you here with such questionable company." Jack's expression went cold. "Mrs. Patterson, if you have nothing polite to say, I suggest you move along." "I am simply concerned for your reputation," the woman said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Associating with a woman of her character reflects poorly on you." "The only thing reflecting poorly right now is your manners," Jack said, his voice hard. "Miss Hartwell is a good and decent person, and she deserves to be treated with respect. If you cannot manage that, then I suggest you keep your opinions to yourself." Mrs. Patterson's face flushed red. "Well, No, you probably have not," Jack said, "and that is part of the problem. Good evening, Mrs. Patterson." He took Clara's arm and led her out onto the porch, away from the crowd and the music. Clara was shaking, the confrontation bringing back all the shame and humiliation she had felt in St. Louis. "I am sorry," she said. "I should not have come. I should not have put you in that position." "Stop," Jack said firmly. He took both her hands in his, forcing her to look at him. "You have nothing to apologize for. That woman is small-minded and cruel, and her opinion means nothing to me. Your past does not matter here, Clara. Do you understand me? It does not matter." Clara felt tears spill down her cheeks, and she could not stop them. "You keep saying that, but I do not know if I believe it. I do not know if I can believe it." "Then let me prove it to you," Jack said. He reached up and gently wiped away her tears with his thumb. "Let me show you that not all men are liars. Let me show you that you deserve to be cherished and respected. Let me show you that your past does not define your future." "How?" Clara whispered. "By being here every day, every week, for as long as it takes for you to believe me." His voice was fierce and tender all at once. "I am not going anywhere, Clara. I am not going to change my mind or decide you are not worth the effort. I am here, and I am asking you to give me a chance to prove that I mean what I say." Clara looked into his eyes, those creek water eyes that had seen her at her worst and had not flinched. And for the first time in a very long time, she let herself hope. "I am scared," she said. "I know," Jack said, "but I am right here, and I am not going anywhere." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, but she did not want to. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted to believe that something good could come from all the pain and mistakes. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and reverent, a promise more than a demand, and Clara felt the last of her walls crumble, leaving her vulnerable and terrified and alive. When they finally pulled apart, Jack rested his forehead against hers. "I am falling in love with you, Clara Hartwell, and I need you to know that before we go any further. I need you to know that this is real for me." "It is real for me too," Clara whispered, "and that scares me more than anything." "We will figure it out together," Jack said, "one day at a time." They did not go back inside the dance hall. Instead, Jack drove her back to the boarding house, and they sat on the porch in the cool November night talking until the stars began to fade. He told her about his dreams for the ranch, about the herd he was building, about the legacy he wanted to leave. She told him about her childhood in a small town in Illinois, about the mother she had lost to fever when she was 12, about the loneliness that had driven her to St. Louis in search of something more. By the time he finally kissed her goodnight and drove away, Clara felt as if she had been carrying a weight for years and had finally been allowed to set it down. She climbed the stairs to her room feeling lighter than air, terrified and hopeful in equal measure. The months that followed were a revelation. Jack courted her with a patience and steadiness that gradually wore down her fears. He brought her wildflowers picked from the desert, their bright blooms defying the harsh landscape. He shared his meals with her, his time, his thoughts. He introduced her to his ranch hands, making it clear that she was to be treated with respect, and slowly, gradually, Clara began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had found someone who truly meant the words he spoke. By the time spring arrived in 1879, bringing with it warmer days and the promise of new beginnings, Clara knew she was in love. Not the desperate, clinging love she had felt for Thomas, which had been born of loneliness and the need to be wanted. This was different, deeper. A love built on trust and respect and the quiet joy of being with someone who saw all of her, flaws and all, and chose her anyway. One warm April evening, as they sat on the porch of the ranch house watching the sunset, Jack took her hand. "I have something to ask you," he said, and his voice was nervous in a way she had never heard before. "What is it?" Clara asked, her heart beginning to pound. Jack stood up and pulled her to her feet. "Clara Hartwell, I know you have been hurt. I know you have reasons to be cautious, but I need you to know that I love you with everything I am. You have made my life richer and fuller than I ever thought possible, and I'm asking you, hoping you will say yes to marry me, to build a life with me here, to be my partner and my best friend and the person I wake up to every morning for the rest of my life." Clara felt tears stream down her face, but for once they were tears of joy, not pain. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Jack, I will marry you." He swept her into his arms and kissed her with a passion that made her knees weak. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and laughing, he said, "I do not have a ring yet. I wanted to ask you first, wanted to make sure you would say yes before I presumed." "I do not need a ring," Clara said. "I just need you." They were married 3 weeks later, a small ceremony at the church in Redemption with Mr. Hendricks and a few of Jack's closest friends as witnesses. Clara wore a simple white dress she had made herself, and Jack wore his best suit. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Clara felt as if she were stepping into a new life, leaving behind the shame and pain of the past, and embracing a future bright with possibility. The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Clara moved into the ranch house, and together they worked to make it truly a home. She planted a garden, coaxing vegetables and flowers from the stubborn desert soil. Jack taught her to ride, patiently guiding her through the basics until she could keep her seat at a canter. They worked side by side during the day and fell into each other's arms at night, discovering the intimacy that came with trust and love. There were still whispers in town, still people who looked at Clara with judgment in their eyes. But Jack's steadfast support and the evidence of their genuine love gradually began to change minds. Mr. Hendricks remained a loyal friend, and slowly other people in town began to treat Clara with respect. She would never be fully accepted by everyone, but she found she did not care as much as she once had. She had Jack, she had a home, and she had a future. That was enough. In the summer of 1880, Clara realized she was pregnant. She told Jack one evening as they sat together on the porch watching the stars come out. His face lit up with a joy so pure it took her breath away. "Are you sure?" he asked, his hand going to her still flat stomach. "Yes," Clara said, laughing at his excitement. "The doctor confirmed it today." Jack pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of glass. "I am going to be a father," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a family." "Are you ready for that?" Clara asked, suddenly nervous. They had not talked much about children, and she worried that this was too soon, that he might feel trapped. "Ready?" Jack laughed. "Clara, I have been ready for this since the day I met you. You are my family, and now we are going to add to it. I could not be happier." The pregnancy was not easy. The desert heat made Clara sick, and she spent the worst of the summer months inside trying to stay cool. Jack was endlessly patient, bringing her cool water, fanning her when she was too hot to sleep, holding her hair back when she was sick. He hired an additional ranch hand so he could spend more time with her, not wanting to leave her alone for long stretches. As her belly grew, so did their excitement. They spent evenings planning for the baby, arguing good-naturedly about names, imagining what their child would look like. Jack built a cradle from pine wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. Clara sewed tiny clothes, her heart full to bursting with love for the child she had not yet met. In February of 1881, during a cold snap that brought frost to the desert, Clara went into labor. It was long and difficult, hours of pain that seemed to go on forever. Jack stayed with her the whole time, holding her hand, murmuring encouragement, refusing to leave even when the doctor suggested he might be more comfortable elsewhere. When their son finally arrived, red-faced and wailing, Clara held him and wept. He was perfect, tiny, and fierce, with a shock of dark hair and his father's eyes. Jack looked at his son with an expression of such love and awe that Clara fell in love with him all over again. "What should we call him?" Jack asked, his voice rough with emotion. Clara looked down at the baby in her arms, at his tiny fists and his scrunched-up face. "Samuel," she said, "after my father." "Samuel Mercer," Jack said, trying out the name. "It is perfect." They brought Samuel home to the ranch, and life settled into a new rhythm. Clara had never known she could be so tired or so happy. The baby demanded constant attention, feeding and changing and soothing, but every smile, every coo, every tiny milestone filled her with a joy she had not known existed. Jack was a devoted father, taking over whenever he could so Clara could rest. She would often find him in the nursery in the middle of the night, holding Samuel and talking to him in a low voice, telling him about the ranch and the horses and the wide desert sky. Watching them together, Clara felt a peace settle over her that she had spent years searching for. As Samuel grew from a baby into a toddler, the ranch prospered. Jack's hard work and careful management paid off, and they were able to hire more hands, expand the herd, and make improvements to the house. Clara started taking in sewing work again, not because they needed the money, but because she enjoyed it, liked the feeling of creating something beautiful with her own hands. The people in town who had once whispered about her past now greeted her with respect. She was Mrs. Mercer, wife of one of the most successful ranchers in the territory, mother to a bright and happy little boy. She had earned her place through hard work and determination, and slowly the shame that had once defined her faded into memory. In the spring of 1883, Clara found herself pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in November she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose. She had Clara's brown curls and a sunny disposition that charmed everyone she met. Samuel, now 2.5, was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to hold her and help take care of her. The ranch house rang with the sounds of children, laughter and crying, and the endless noise of a growing family. Clara, who had once thought she would spend her life alone and ashamed, now found herself surrounded by love. There were hard days, of course, times when money was tight, or the weather turned bad, or one of the children was sick. But through it all, Jack was there, steady and sure, reminding her that they were in this together. One evening in 1885, as they sat on the porch watching Samuel chase fireflies while Rose slept in Clara's arms, Jack said, "Do you ever think about St. Louis anymore?" Clara considered the question. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but not the way I used to. I used to think about it with shame and regret. Now when I think about it, I just feel grateful that it led me here. If I had not made those mistakes, if I had not been forced to leave, I never would have found you." Jack reached over and took her hand. "Your past does not matter here," he said, echoing the words that had changed her life. "But I am glad for it anyway because it brought you to me." "Do you really mean that?" Clara asked. "After all this time, you still believe that my past does not matter?" "I have always believed it," Jack said, "from the first moment I saw you in Hendrix's store looking like you were ready to run at the first sign of trouble. I saw someone strong and brave. Someone who had been hurt but had not let it break her. Your past does not define you, Clara. Your character does, your choices do, and you have chosen every day to be kind and loving and good. That is what matters." Clara felt tears well up, as they still did whenever Jack spoke to her with such unwavering faith. "I love you," she said simply. "I do not think I will ever be able to fully express how much you have given me. You gave me a home when I had nowhere to go. You gave me your name when mine was tarnished. You gave me a family when I thought I would always be alone. You gave me back my faith in people, in goodness, in the possibility of happiness. How do I ever thank you for that?" "You do not need to thank me," Jack said. "Loving you, building this life with you, it has been the greatest joy of my life. You saved me just as much as I saved you, Clara. Before you, this ranch was just a place I worked. You made it a home. You gave me a reason to build something lasting, something meaningful. You gave me Samuel and Rose, and the promise of more years together. I am the one who should be thanking you." They sat together in the gathering darkness, holding hands, watching their children play. The desert stretched out around them, vast and unforgiving, but here on this porch, surrounded by the life they had built together, Clara felt safe. She felt loved. She felt like she belonged. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the growth of their family. In 1887, Clara gave birth to another son, whom they named Henry after Jack's father. The ranch continued to thrive, weathering droughts and hard winters, growing in size and reputation. Samuel showed an early aptitude for working with horses, spending hours in the corrals with his father, learning to ride and rope. Rose was quieter, more introspective, with a love for books that Clara encouraged by teaching her to read at an early age. Henry was still a baby, all chubby cheeks and gummy smiles, but already showing signs of his father's stubborn determination. Clara's days were full, a constant flurry of cooking and cleaning and caring for children and helping with the ranch, but she would not have traded it for anything. Every morning she woke up in Jack's arms, and every night she fell asleep grateful for the life they had built. The whispers about her past had long since faded, replaced by respect and acceptance. She was a pillar of the small community now, someone people came to for advice or help. She organized a school for the ranch children, teaching them their letters and numbers in the ranch house parlor. She helped deliver babies when the doctor was too far away. She became, in every way that mattered, a part of redemption. One afternoon in the fall of 1890, as Clara was preparing dinner while the children played outside, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find a stranger, a well-dressed woman in traveling clothes who looked at her with a mixture of nervousness and determination. "Can I help you?" Clara asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "I am looking for Clara Hartwell," the woman said. "I was told she might be here." "I am Clara Mercer now," Clara said carefully. "I was Clara Hartwell. What is this about?" The woman's eyes filled with tears. "My name is Margaret Blackwell. Thomas Blackwell was my husband." Clara felt as if the ground had dropped out from under her. She gripped the doorframe, her mind racing. "I do not understand. What are you doing here?" "May I come in?" Margaret asked. "I promise I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need to speak with you." Against her better judgment, Clara let the woman inside. She led her to the kitchen and poured 2 cups of coffee, her hands shaking. They sat down at the table, and Margaret looked around the comfortable room with something like envy. "You have built a good life here," Margaret said. "Why are you here?" Clara asked, not willing to engage in small talk with the woman whose husband had nearly destroyed her. Margaret took a deep breath. "Thomas died 2 years ago. His business failed, and he took his own life rather than face the shame of bankruptcy. After he died, I found letters, so many letters from women he had seduced and abandoned. You were not the only one, Clara. You were one of dozens." Clara sat back, stunned. She had thought she was special, that what she had shared with Thomas had been unique. The realization that she had been just one of many was somehow both devastating and freeing. "I am sorry for your loss," she said automatically. "Do not be," Margaret said bitterly. "He was a liar and a cheat. I wasted 20 years of my life on him, but that is not why I am here. I am here because after he died, I started trying to track down the women he had hurt, to apologize for what he did, for what I did. I remember coming to your workplace, saying terrible things to you. I was angry and hurt, and I took it out on you when you were just as much a victim as I was. I am sorry, Clara. I am so very sorry." Clara stared at the woman across from her. This woman who had once represented everything she feared and hated about her past. And she felt, instead of anger or resentment, only pity. "Thank you for coming all this way to tell me that. I appreciate it. But you should know that I have made peace with what happened. I am happy now, truly happy. I have a husband who loves me and children who bring me joy. What happened with Thomas led me here, and I cannot regret that." Margaret smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "You are lucky. I am glad you found happiness. Not many of us do." They talked for a while longer, two women who had been connected by one man's lies, now finding common ground in survival and moving forward. When Margaret finally left, continuing on her journey to make amends with the other women Thomas had wronged, Clara stood on the porch and watched her go, feeling as if a chapter of her life had finally closed. Jack came home that evening to find Clara unusually quiet. She told him about Margaret's visit, about Thomas's death, about the revelation that she had been one of many. Jack listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he pulled her into his arms. "Does it change anything?" he asked gently. Clara thought about it. "No," she said finally. "It does not change anything. It makes it clearer somehow that what happened was never about me. It was about him, his flaws, his dishonesty. I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And if I had not been, I would never have come here. I would never have met you." "Your past does not matter here," Jack said, as he had said so many times before. "But I hope you finally believe that now. I hope you can let it go completely and just be here, with me, with our children, living this life we have built." Clara looked up at him, at this man who had seen her at her lowest and had offered her not judgment but grace. "I finally believe someone meant those words truly," she said. "I believe you, Jack. I believe that my past does not define me, that I am more than my mistakes. You taught me that. You showed me that every day for 12 years, and I am grateful beyond words." Jack kissed her then, a kiss full of love and promise, and the quiet certainty of years spent building something real. And Clara kissed him back, knowing that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The years continued to unfold, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. Samuel grew into a young man, taking on more responsibility at the ranch and showing every sign of being a worthy successor to his father. Rose developed a passion for teaching and began helping Clara with the ranch school, her patience and kindness making her a favorite among the children. Henry was wild and adventurous, always getting into mischief, but his laughter filled the house with warmth. In 1895, Clara and Jack celebrated their 16th wedding anniversary. They sat on the porch as they had done countless times before, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Samuel was out checking the herd. Rose was reading to Henry inside, and for a moment everything was perfect and still. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked. "Marrying a woman with a scandalous past?" Jack laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Not for a single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Clara. You and our children, this life we have built together. I would not change a moment of it. I used to be so afraid, Clara said softly, afraid that people would never let me forget, afraid that I would never be anything more than the woman who made a terrible mistake. But you showed me that I could be more. You showed me that I deserved more. You always deserved more, Jack said. You just needed to believe it yourself. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steadiness that had been her anchor for so many years. Thank you, she said, for everything, for believing in me when no one else did, for standing by me when it would have been easier to walk away, for loving me enough to help me learn to love myself again. It was my pleasure, Jack said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. And my privilege. They sat together as the stars began to emerge, as the desert cooled and the night sounds began their familiar chorus. Inside the house, they could hear Rose's voice reading aloud, Henry's occasional interruption, the comfortable sounds of home and family. Clara thought back to the woman she had been when she arrived in Redemption 17 years ago, broken and ashamed, with nothing but $5 and a past she could not escape. She thought about how far she had come, how much she had grown, how much love she had found in this harsh and beautiful place. Your past does not matter here, Jack had said all those years ago, and Clara had desperately wanted to believe him. But it had taken time, patience, and unwavering love for her to truly internalize those words, to understand that she was not defined by her mistakes, but by her choices, her character, her capacity for love and growth. Now, sitting on this porch with her husband beside her and her children safe inside, Clara finally, completely believed it. Her past did not matter here. What mattered was the present, this moment, this life they had built from dust and determination and love. What mattered was the future stretching out before them, full of promise and possibility. Jack took her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers, and Clara squeezed back, a silent communication that needed no words. They had weathered storms together, literal and figurative. They had built something strong and lasting, a family and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. As the years continued to pass, Clara and Jack grew older together, their love deepening with time like the roots of the cottonwoods that marked their land. Samuel married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread, bringing a sweet-natured woman named Elizabeth into the family. They had children of their own, making Clara and Jack grandparents, a development that brought joy beyond measure. Rose eventually married a teacher who came to Redemption to work at the new school that had been built in town, and they settled nearby, filling their home with books and laughter. Henry, true to his adventurous nature, tried his hand at everything from mining to surveying before finally coming back to the ranch and admitting that this was where he belonged. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1904, the family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The house was full to bursting with children and grandchildren, with laughter and love and the comfortable chaos of a large family. Clara stood in her kitchen, now expanded and modernized with the passage of years, and looked around at the faces of the people she loved most in the world. Jack came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. They were both graying now, their faces lined with the years of hard work and desert sun, but the love between them had not diminished. If anything, it had grown stronger, tempered by time and trials into something unbreakable. "Happy anniversary," he murmured in her ear. "Happy anniversary," Clara replied, leaning back into his embrace. 25 years, can you believe it? "Best 25 years of my life," Jack said, "and I am looking forward to the next 25. Clara turned in his arms to face him. "Do you remember what you said to me that day in the store when you told me about the gossip?" "Your past does not matter here," Jack quoted. "How could I forget? It was the day I knew I was going to marry you." "You knew that day?" Clara asked, surprised. "I knew the day I met you," Jack admitted. But that was the day I knew for certain, when you looked at me like you could not believe anyone would say those words and mean them. I knew then that I wanted to spend the rest of my life proving to you that I did mean them, that you were worthy of love and respect and happiness. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, as they still did whenever Jack spoke from the heart. You did prove it, she said. Every single day for 25 years, you proved it. And I finally believed someone meant those words truly. I believed you, Jack. I still believe you. Good, Jack said, and kissed her, oblivious to the hoots and hollers from their children and grandchildren gathered in the next room. Because I plan on spending the next 25 years proving it all over again. They rejoined the celebration, surrounded by the family they had created, the legacy they had built. As Clara looked around at the faces of her children and grandchildren, at the home she and Jack had made together, she felt a peace that went soul deep. She had traveled so far from that broken woman who had arrived in redemption with nothing but shame and fear. She had become someone strong, someone respected, someone loved. And it had all started with a cowboy who had seen past her mistakes to the person she could become, who had offered her grace when she had expected judgment, who had loved her when she did not believe she was worthy of love. The sun was setting over the desert, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple and red, and Clara stepped out onto the porch to watch it. Jack followed, as he always did, and they stood together in comfortable silence, watching the day end and knowing that tomorrow would bring new beginnings. I love you, Clara said, not needing a reason or an occasion, just wanting him to know. I love you too, Jack replied. Always have, always will. And as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, as the sounds of family and laughter drifted out from the house behind them, Clara knew that she had found what she had been searching for all those years ago when she had climbed down from that stagecoach into the dusty street of redemption. She had found home. She had found love. She had found herself. And her past, that burden she had carried for so long, truly did not matter here. What mattered was this moment, this man, this life they had built together from nothing but faith and determination and love that refused to give up. What mattered was that she had been given a second chance, and she had taken it with both hands and made something beautiful from it. The cowboy had said her past did not matter here, and she had finally believed someone meant those words truly. And in believing, she had been set free.